Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Scholten. I will be moderating this 47th Academy today. Presenting will be Martin Strijbis. He is the PO of reporting, and this Academy is all about reporting. Very short reminder that we are busy with our string of spring academies. Last week we had the simulate interview. Recording of that is available on our website. This is the reporting academy. Next week we will have one about the request command, then one about survey access, and we will end with how to start interviews. Agenda today, it will be a demo, and we will have time for some questions after the demo. Before we start the demo, let me remind you of the previous reporting academies that we run. That was Academy 24, that was about Enfield reporting. That is a standard reporting tool in a manager where you can look at a quite extensive fieldwork report and even run some top lines and share that with your customer if needed. That runs on the same technology as the reporting that we will show you today. And then we have Academy 35, standard and custom reporting. In that academy, we explained what repositories are, how you create a repository, how you can access a repository, and how to add surveys to a repository. In this academy, we will show you how to very quickly create a report using these repositories. With that, I'm going to hand over to Martin. Find you and make you presenter.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone from Amsterdam. Today, I will indeed show you how to quickly create a report on top of the data that has been sent to a Enfield repository. I chose Power BI to create my report in, but seeing that a repository is nothing more than a Azure SQL database, anything that can connect to a SQL database and that creates reports can be used for it. So let me start sharing my screen. And go to the manager. Of course, if you want to create a dashboard, you need data. And if you want data for market research, obvious choice is to run a survey. So I've created a survey for a short scenario that you would run a service satisfaction survey, like you sent your device for repairs and you got it back and they ask you, or we ask you to rate how the repair went. So I created a very basic survey. I asked you how satisfied you were with the service. I asked to rate on a few statements about the surveys and say if you're satisfied or unsatisfied with it. This is put into a matrix question. And then I asked to, on basis of the service, recommend this company to people, and of course with the open answer. So it's a very basic survey, but it gives me enough pointers to use to quickly set up a report and to demo this. There's two things you want to see here, is that I used a table command for anything that is a loop or has a second dimensions, like a matrix or a repeat loop. You need to use the table command. Enfield will warn you if you don't use it, that the data will not be available. And I used properties for the NPS question to later on during the report making easily convert the number to the NPS segment. And you can see that it uses some data from the sample table. So how would this look like? Well, let me create a survey put it in the Reporting Academy survey group. It's an online survey. I can upload a script and I can save this and publish the script. And then I can copy a test link and add the sample data. And this should start my survey. And here's the date that that I added. Am I satisfied with the service? No, I wasn't satisfied. Why not? Our speed of repair was very slow. The cost was very high, so I was just very disappointed. They did nicely pick it up. That was fine. And the delivery was also fine. I got my TV back very broken. It was full of scratches. It did work, and the thread leaf stuff was fine. But all in all, so would I recommend? Definitely not. Why? It was way too costly. And Chuck Norris approves. So now for this survey, I would have one single test interview, which if you build a dashboard, doesn't give you enough angle to see how your dashboard will look like. You can ask your colleagues or your friends, or you can spend an hour doing a multitude of test links to get some data. Or you can wait until the fieldwork has been done, but then you're already behind. So it would be nice if you could generate some data easily to start building your test dashboard before your fieldwork is completed. So when your fieldwork is completed, you can just load the other data and you will have your dashboard already. And for that, Enfield now has a simulation of interviews. So I can simulate up to 500 interviews, and just let me do 500. And I need to enable reporting, and I will also upload sample. And that's because we need some information for this sample for reporting later on. And the sample looks like this. So I have a respondent key, as you should have. There's a column for the product that was repaired, the service date, and in which service center the repair actually was done. And we have a north and a south service center. Let's not save this. So I upload the sample. It verifies it, and now I can start a simulation. And you can see here that it will start the simulation. This can take like up to a few minutes, depending on how busy it is. So we're not going to wait for it. I already prepared a copy of this survey. As you can see here, this one was already created, and I already added it to a repository. If you know the repositories, please refer to the academy we gave about those. You can easily create a repository depending on what you need for it. Have a very small one until a very big one. I already created one and I added one survey. So if I go to setup and to surveys, you can see that I already added the Academy demo survey to it. So let me connect my Power BI to this repository. I can easily do this by saying get data, Azure data, Azure SQL database. And it will ask me for a server and a database, which not by coincidence are to be found in the manager. So I can copy the server name and I can copy the database name. And I can copy the username and copy the password, and I would connect to the database level, not to the survey level, because this user has access to the database, not to the entire server. And I can connect, and it will display me a whole set of tables. It is a relational database, so the data is spread logically across a set of tables, which you sometimes need to join to get the right information. We want information data from the answers table, from the interviews table, and from the sample data custom fields table. The sample data is divided across two tables. We have the sample data records, which contain all the system data tables like respondent key, like response code, those kinds of things that are always there for every survey. And we have the sample data custom fields, which are the columns that you edit yourself to the table. Let's start with these three tables and load them. And we just loaded our first data to our dashboard. Let's start with a simple card. Go to interviews, the interview ID, and make a count of it. And you can see I've run a nice simulation with the maximum number of interviews, which is 500. At least you can see I have 500 records in my data. And let's call this interviews. Okay, that's the first step. Now we probably want to see some data from the questionnaire and from the questions. That data can be found in the answers table. If it's an open question, the data is in the alpha value. If it's a numeric question, it's in the numeric fields. And if it's a coded question, there is a category value ID, and this joins to the question categories table in the database. So from the question categories table, we want to see the code and the value. And there you can see codes and actually category values. For ease of use, let's rename these columns to answer label and answer code. And there we are. And we might want to see the also the question text and the question ID as was used in the questionnaire. So we want to have the question text, and we want to have the end-field question ID. And let's call this a question ID and the question text. Great. Let's apply and close this, and let's build our first chart. We'll put in a nice donut chart. And what we will do is from the interviews, have the ID again as a value. That's a count. And from the answers, let's have the answer label as the legend. What you can see here, that it counts across all questions, which is slightly too much. So we need to filter this down to a question. So I can drag question ID on top of the filters for this visual and select Q1. And you can see here that we didn't establish the relation between the answer table and the interview table correctly. So it does have a relation, but it needs to have a single or both directions. So one can filter the other, both can filter each other. And we can see here now that indeed we have slightly more not satisfied people than satisfied people. Simulations are random data, so it's obvious that you never get equal results. And let's get rid of the ugly purple color. Let's make no the obvious red, and yes, the obvious green. And we can make the title slightly better. There we go. There we have our first chart. Of course, you now know basically nothing, unless that at least half the people are dissatisfied with your service, which is not a very good result. But there we go. You might want to know why this is the case. And as you remember, we had this set of statements that people could answer. And let's see if we can make a chart for that. Again, we can make a nice stacked bar chart. Let's do the same trick. So from interviews, we take the ID as the x-axis because that's the counts. We take the answer label for the legends, and we need to filter on the question text again, or the question ID. That's slightly more convenient. So the problem only now is where are the statements? Because this is just the answers for all the statements on this question. You can see here that it has a count of 3,000. We had 6 statements and we had 500 interviews for each. And I already gave a small hint with the table command that you had to do it because the statements are found in what we call in Enfield the answer to context items. Basically, you give a single answer within the context of the statements for the same question, and we need to join this information. So we need to travel 2 tables, context list items, and then we have our code and our label. And here you can see the code and the labels. So let's call this a context label so we can find it easier. Again, we can apply and close. And it should appear in the answers. And I can use this across my y-axis. And then you can see here the statements from the matrix and some very fruity colors. I'm not sure if I like this default color set for Power BI. Again, we can change this, but this is a demo to show you how reporting and how the data works and not how Power BI colors different things. So we have one more question remaining that we want to show. And that's the NPS question. Let's add that to a second page. Again, we can make a nice, let's make a stacked column chart this time. Let's take the interview ID again as the y-axis for the counts. And let's have the answer label as the legend. And let's have the question ID as a filter. And let's do that Q4. And you can see now that it now displays everything to the score of the NPS question and not the nice segments that you are used, maybe like the detractors and the neutrals. Again, if we go back to the questionnaire, you can see that I put in some custom properties on the answer level. So let's see if we can add those to the data and use those for our charting. Again, we can transform the data. In interviews, we expanded the question categories once, and we only added the code and the value, but let's also add the question properties to this. And from the question properties, and again, this is a join to a table, to the question category properties table. Let's take the key and the value from this table. And here we can see our custom properties in our data. So let's call this property key. And this one, property value, so we can find it. Okay, there we have it. We can apply this and close this. And now instead of the answer label, let's see if we can use the property value for our legend. And there we have our detractors, our neutrals, and our promoters. Again, service is not so good for this company. Usually you want more promoters than detractors. Luckily, this is a simulation. So far, I think this is a good moment to see if there are any questions right now.
There weren't any questions so far. If you have any questions, please type that into the chat and I will pass them through. No questions yet, Martin.
Okay, then let's continue. So all the charts that I've built so far are from data from the questionnaire. And you might know that in the sample table, we also had some information that we wanted to maybe use for reporting. And let's go to the sample table. And here we have the sample table custom fields. So we might want to have the NPS numbers by products to see if different products maybe are more, the people are more satisfied with the repair of their PC than their TV, or maybe there's a difference between the service center, or maybe even over time. So let's see if we first can join the sample data to the interview data, and then see if we can use it for reporting. So first thing we need to do is find a way to join it. So let's traverse to our interviews. Let's join some data from the interviews table to this table. And from the interviews table, I want to join the ID field. Interview ID. And then we want to transform this table. Right now, the code is all the columns are stacked on top of each other. If we want to use this as filter, you can only filter down first on product, and then you can see for TV or for PC or for your device, which means that if you want to look at a combination of service center and product, you need to convert this to have a column for product, have a column for service center, and have a column for service date. And this is possible. First, let's remove the data that we don't need from this table. And then let's do a transformation which is called pivoting. So I want to pivot a column. I want to use the values in the value column as values, and the other columns use them as the column name. And I just did the transformation, and I now have a column for products. I have a column for service center and a column for service date. Basically, this reflects completely the original sample table that we had. Okay, then I can save this. And let's look at our data model. And you can see here that we still haven't have a connection between interviews and the sample data custom fields table. But we can easily have this interview ID, drag it on top of the interviews ID field, which should be the same. It has established the connection. It's already bidirectional, so sample data can filter interviews and filter interviews can filter sample data custom fields in our reporting. And this should set us up to basically split this chart that we have by, let's say, service center. So we can go to the sample data custom fields. Let's select service center as our x-axis. And you can see now that this is the distribution between south and north. Again, this is the counts, but let's make these, instead of the counts, the percentage of the grand total. And we actually want to have the column total, which means that we would need to create a custom measurement here. Again, this is not about Power BI, but we might be able to do it if there's some time. We have Service Center here. We can also make this by product. Apparently, a lot of PCs got repaired, much more than TVs or radios, but that doesn't matter much. One more thing that we can do is we might want to have some reports over time. And we have a service date field, but if I drag this in on the x-axis, that you can see here, it's all separate one-day dates. There's no way, it doesn't recognize that it's day field. It doesn't recognize that it can combine it into weeks or months. And that is because everything from the sample data in N field is actually text. It's a text field as a date, but Power BI easily lets us convert this into a date. And then I apply a close. It recognizes it's an actual date. And it created a hierarchy. And I now have my results per month. And this allows us to set up trend lines and everything that we would want. I think this is a rather important thing to note about how the data is written into N field. Again, this brings us to half an hour and to what I prepared that I wanted to show you definitely.
We actually have a question. No.
Awesome.
If there are multiple versions of the script, how would that work here?
They all stack on top of each other, but I can show you. Let's go to transform data. And let's go to, let me create a copy of this and remove all the things we have. Let's just go to the questions table. This holds all the metadata on a question level, and it also joins to the surveys table. And if I go to the N field surveys table, you can see that it has the N field survey ID. That's the ID that you can see in your URL bar if you navigate to a survey in the manager. And you can see it has a version. And this version is nothing more than a very intricate timestamp. But what you would see is that if we publish a second version of the script, you would get 5 more rows, which represent the data for this second survey. They would also get 5 more question IDs, and in the answers table, the question IDs would get to the new question IDs. Everything would stack on top of each other. And if there's changes to the text, then you would need to find a way to make the text the same across versions by doing a column change in your reporting software of choice.
Any more questions? Please use the chat. I wanted to give people a few minutes to do that. Let me already start my usual last remarks and then turn back if there are any new questions. As always, the recording of this will be made available later this week. If you have any topics for a academy, please write to your help desk and we will take that into consideration. And we will talk again in a week time, this time about the request command. That's a new command in Odin. I don't see any new questions coming in. No raised hands. So I assume everything is clear. We can end this academy here. Thank you for your attention. Talk to you next week about the request command. Thank you. Bye-bye.